Let's take a look at how we can use a least common denominator to solve this rational equation. This one's got a lot in it, so hopefully you've gone back and you've watched some of the easier ones, and you're not just jumping into this as your first one, because this has a lot of stuff that we need to do in it. First thing, just a couple things I would do to get started. I don't like subtracting, so I'm going to make this into a plus a negative 4x, just to remind myself that if I need to distribute, it's a negative 4 that I'm distributing. Next up, even before I begin building my least common denominator, I need to make sure all my denominators are factored, so this problem also has something to factor in it. X squared minus 9 is a difference of 2 squares, hopefully you recognize that, and so that factors into x plus 3, x minus 3. Don't try to build your least common denominator until you factored everything. Looking at all the pieces I have then, I can see that my least common denominator is going to be x minus 3 and x plus 3. I'll need to take both of those pieces. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use that least common denominator to eliminate the fractions and make something that's not rational, make something that should be a little bit easier to solve. So I'm going to multiply all the numerators by this least common denominator, or I can do a little bit of work in my head. For example, I know in this final piece the x plus 3's would cancel out, but x minus 3 would not. If it confuses you the way I did that, go ahead and write both parts of the LCD down and cross out the x plus 3. Next up, if I multiplied the 8x squared by my LCD, both of those would get eliminated and nothing would be left over. So that's just 8x squared in the numerator. That's, I guess, good. And then finally, in this beginning part of the problem, x minus 3 would be eliminated when I multiplied the top by the LCD, but x plus 3 would not be eliminated. Okay, so let's go ahead and do some distributing and see what's left over now that the fractions are all eliminated. So I'll distribute the 6 over here and get 6x plus 18. No more fraction, that's what I was going for. Equals, the next part is just 8x squared. Both parts of the denominator will be canceled out. And finally, I need to make sure I distribute a negative 4x. Hopefully you caught that. So I have minus 4x squared and then plus 12x. And so take a look at what we've done. We definitely have made it a little bit easier in the sense of there's no more fractions to solve, but it's still quadratic. There's something with x squared in it. So let's do a little bit of simplifying and then solve this quadratic equation with factoring. So I'm going to combine like terms. I'll have 4x squared and then plus 12x. Well, recall that if you need to factor something or solve anything quadratic, whether you're factoring or using the quadratic formula, it needs to be equal to 0. So let's get both of these terms moved over to the right to get this equal to 0. So 4x squared, I'm going to subtract the 6x, so I end up with just plus 6x when I combine like terms, and then minus 18. Okay, so now let's see. Well, one thing that I can do even before I try to factor, I told you this problem has a lot in it, is I can divide both sides by 2. I'm allowed to do that in an equation, so I might as well do that to get some smaller numbers to work with. So 2x squared plus 3x, and then minus 9 is what I want to factor. And so, oh goody, I get to use the box method to factor this. So I'm going to do this part relatively quickly. If you need a refresher on the box method, go back and watch a different video, I suppose. So first term and last term, I need to find two numbers that multiply to negative 18 but add up to 3. And so the two numbers that do that are going to be 6x and negative 3x. And then finally, if I pull out common factors, I get a negative 3 and a 2x right there, and then an x and a positive 3. And so my factors must be 2x minus 3 and then x plus 3. Alright, so I'm almost done with this very long problem. Finally then, my two possible answers, if I draw the line down here, I've got x equals negative 3 as a possibility, and then I've got x equals 3/2 as a possibility. Remember, what we're really doing to get those is I'm saying 2x minus 3 equals 0, and then solving that equation. Well, before I just circle these and move on, I told you there's a lot to this problem, I once again need to check and see if these are extraneous solutions. Will plugging in either of those values for x result in dividing by 0? So go back and take a look at the original problem. If I make any of these x's either a 3/2 or a negative 3, would I be dividing by 0? And hopefully you're seeing right here, there's going to be a problem. If I made x negative 3, negative 3 plus 3 is 0, and I cannot ever divide by 0. So in my solutions, negative 3 is not going to work out. I need to make sure that I cross that out, say that it's like an extraneous solution, it's not going to work. The only answer to this problem is going to be 3/2.